The starship Avalon glided through the inky blackness of space, its sleek hull reflecting the distant glow of Zentari's twin suns. Captain Jason Hart stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the approaching planet, a world known as much for its enigmatic beauty as for its disdainful inhabitants. Zentari was a place few humans had ever set foot on, and those who had returned with stories of cold indifference and alien arrogance. Zentari itself was a breathtaking sight, a planet of cerulean oceans and emerald continents, its atmosphere shimmering with a subtle iridescence that hinted at the advanced technology hidden beneath its surface. But Jason knew better than to be fooled by the planet's outward beauty. Zentari was a world steeped in tradition and xenophobia, its people fiercely protective of their culture and deeply suspicious of outsiders. Jason's mission was a delicate one. The Earth Federation was in dire need of the rare minerals found only on Zentari, resources that could tip the balance of power in an increasingly unstable galaxy. But the Zentarians, with their advanced technology and isolationist policies, had refused all previous overtures for an alliance. The Federation's hope rested on Jason's shoulders, a hope that he could succeed where others had failed. As the Avalon entered the planet's atmosphere, Jason couldn't help but feel a knot of tension in his stomach. He had been briefed extensively on Zentari's customs and protocols, but no amount of preparation could fully alleviate the unease that came with venturing into the unknown. The Zentarans were known to be a proud and secretive people, and their disdain for humans was well documented. Among them, one name stood out: Lady Miral. Lady Miral was a member of the Zentaran High Council, a figure of immense influence and power. Her beauty was legendary, even among her own kind: silver hair that flowed like liquid mercury, eyes that shimmered with a light all their own. But it was not her beauty that had made her infamous among those few humans who had encountered her. It was her open contempt for humanity. Reports from previous ambassadors had spoken of her sharp tongue and cutting remarks, of her disdainful glances and mocking laughter. She had made no secret of her belief that humans were an inferior species, both in appearance and in intellect. And now, Jason was to face her directly, tasked with convincing her and the rest of the Zentaran High Council that an alliance with Earth was in their best interest. The Avalon touched down smoothly on the landing platform outside the Zentaran capital, a sprawling city of crystalline towers and verdant gardens that seemed to blend seamlessly with the natural landscape. Jason took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead, before stepping out of the ship. He was immediately met by a group of Zentaran officials, their expressions as cool and unreadable as the polished surfaces of their gleaming uniforms. At their head was a tall, stern-faced man with piercing violet eyes that seemed to scrutinize Jason's every move. "Captain Jason Hart," the man said, his voice smooth and emotionless. "Welcome to Zentari. I am Envoy Kareth, and I will escort you to the High Council. They are awaiting your arrival." Jason nodded, his face a mask of calm professionalism. "Thank you, Envoy Kareth. I appreciate the hospitality." Kareth's expression did not change. "We are eager to see what you have to offer, Captain. But be warned, our people are not easily impressed." With that, Kareth turned and led the way through the city, his long strides forcing Jason to keep pace. The streets were filled with Zentaran citizens, their luminous skin and graceful movements marking them as otherworldly. They glanced at Jason as he passed, their eyes filled with curiosity and a hint of something else, something that felt uncomfortably close to disdain. The High Council chamber was located at the heart of the city, a grand structure of white stone and crystal that seemed to glow with an inner light. As Jason entered the chamber, he was struck by the sheer scale of the room, a vast circular space with high ceilings and walls adorned with intricate carvings depicting Zentaran history and mythology. At the far end of the chamber, seated on a raised platform, was the High Council itself, a group of 7 Zentarans, each more striking than the last. And in the center of them all, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room, was Lady Miral. She was every bit as stunning as the reports had said. Her silver hair cascaded down her back in a waterfall of light, and her eyes, those luminous, almost ethereal eyes, seemed to pierce right through Jason as she looked at him. But it was the expression on her face that truly caught his attention, a look of thinly veiled contempt, as if she were already certain of his failure. "Captain Jason Hart," Lady Miral said, her voice smooth and cold as ice. "Welcome to Zentari. I trust your journey was pleasant?" Jason inclined his head, his voice steady as he replied, "Thank you, Lady Morale. The journey was smooth, and I am honored to be here." "Indeed," Morale replied, her tone dripping with insincerity. "We shall see if your presence here is as enlightening as your Federation believes." The other members of the High Council watched in silence, their expressions unreadable as they observed the exchange. Jason could feel the weight of their scrutiny, but he refused to be intimidated. He had faced worse odds before, and he knew that his mission was too important to allow fear or doubt to take hold. With a calm, steady voice, Jason began to outline the proposal for an alliance between Earth and Zentari, emphasizing the mutual benefits of such a partnership. But as he spoke, he could see Lady Morale's expression harden, her disdain becoming more apparent with each word. When he finished, there was a long, tense silence. Then Lady Morale leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she addressed him directly. "Captain Hart," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You speak well, but words are not enough to convince us of your worth. We Zentarans are a proud and ancient people, and we have little patience for those who would seek to align themselves with us without proving their value." Jason met her gaze without flinching. "I understand, Lady Morale. I am prepared to do whatever it takes to earn your trust and to prove that an alliance with Earth is in the best interest of your people." Morale's lips curved into a faint, almost mocking smile. "Very well, Captain. We shall see if your actions can match your words. But be warned, failure will not be tolerated." With that, the audience was dismissed, and Jason was led out of the chamber by Envoy Kareth. As they walked, Kareth glanced at Jason, his expression as inscrutable as ever. "Lady Morale is not one to be easily swayed," Kareth said quietly. "You will need to tread carefully, Captain. She is not one to forget or forgive easily." Jason nodded, his mind already racing with the challenges that lay ahead. He knew that he was walking a tightrope, and one misstep could send him and the entire mission plummeting into disaster. But he was determined to succeed. Failure was not an option. The next day dawned with a sky of deep indigo, the twin suns of Zentari casting an eerie glow over the crystalline city. Captain Jason Hart had spent the night going over every detail of his mission, preparing himself for the challenges he knew were coming. The conversation with Lady Morale had left a lasting impression, a clear warning that his path to securing an alliance would be anything but easy. When he arrived at the High Council chamber that morning, the atmosphere was as frigid as the previous day. The chamber was filled with a mix of council members, advisors, and high-ranking officials, all of whom turned their attention to Jason as he entered. The silence that greeted him was almost oppressive, a palpable tension hanging in the air. Lady Morale was already seated in her place, her eyes fixed on Jason with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Her expression was unreadable, but the slight arch of her brow hinted at the disdain she barely bothered to conceal. Beside her sat Councillor Varric, a man known for his pragmatism and one of the few voices on the council that might be open to persuasion. As Jason took his seat, Councillor Varric spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Captain Hart, we have reviewed your initial proposal. While it is clear that your Federation stands to gain much from an alliance with Zentari, the benefits for our people remain less certain. We are a self-sufficient world, and we do not easily enter into agreements with those we do not fully trust." Jason nodded, his expression serious. "I understand your concerns, Councillor Varric. My goal here is to establish a foundation of trust and mutual respect between our peoples. I believe that through cooperation we can achieve great things that will benefit both Zentari and Earth." Varric's gaze was steady, but it was Lady Morale who responded, her tone sharp and cutting. "And yet, Captain, you assume that we require your assistance in achieving greatness. Zentari has thrived for millennia without the interference of outsiders. What exactly do you believe you can offer us that we do not already possess?" Jason felt the weight of her words, the challenge implicit in her question. He knew that he had to tread carefully, to navigate the fine line between confidence and arrogance. "Lady Morale, I do not presume to suggest that Zentari requires anything from Earth. However, I believe that collaboration between our worlds could lead to advancements that neither of us could achieve alone. Together we could explore new frontiers in science, technology, and diplomacy." Morale's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a faint smile that did not reach her eyes. "How noble of you, Captain. but I find it difficult to believe that your Federation would be so generous without expecting something in return. After all, humans are known for their ambition. Jason's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to remain composed. He knew that Miral's words were intended to provoke him, to test his resolve. It is true that Earth has much to gain from an alliance with Zentari, but I believe that true partnerships are built on mutual benefit and respect, not on exploitation. My presence here is not to take, but to offer. Miral tilted her head slightly, her gaze never leaving his. And yet, Captain, your offer seems to come with the expectation that we will simply accept your word that it is in our best interest. Trust is not given freely on Zentari. It is earned. Jason nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of her statement. I agree, Lady Miral. Trust must be earned, and I am prepared to do whatever is necessary to prove that my intentions, and those of the Earth Federation, are honorable. The chamber fell into a tense silence as the council members exchanged glances. It was clear that Jason's words had made some impact, though whether it was positive or negative remained to be seen. Finally, Councillor Varric spoke again, his voice measured. Captain Hart, it is clear that you are committed to this mission. However, words alone will not be enough to convince us. We require action, something tangible that demonstrates the value of an alliance with your world. Jason nodded, ready for this challenge. What do you propose, Counselor? Varric exchanged a glance with Lady Miral, who seemed to be contemplating something. After a moment, she leaned forward, her gaze piercing as she addressed Jason. There is a series of trials that all Zentaran leaders must undergo to prove their worthiness, she said, her tone both challenging and inviting. These trials test not only physical strength but also intellect, resilience, and adaptability. If you are truly committed to earning our trust, then perhaps you should undertake these trials yourself. The suggestion hung in the air, and Jason could feel the eyes of the entire chamber on him. It was a daunting proposal, and he knew that the trials were likely designed to test him to his limits, if not beyond. But he also knew that this was the opportunity he had been waiting for, a chance to prove himself in a way that words never could. Without hesitation, Jason nodded. I accept the challenge. A murmur of surprise rippled through the chamber, but Lady Miral's expression remained unchanged, her eyes locked onto his. Very well, Captain. The trials will begin tomorrow at dawn. Prepare yourself. With that, the session was adjourned, and Jason was escorted out of the chamber by Envoy Kareth. As they walked through the corridors of the palace, Kareth glanced at Jason, his expression unreadable. You are either very brave or very foolish, Captain, Kareth said quietly. The trials are not to be taken lightly. They are designed to test every aspect of your being, and many have failed. Jason met Kareth's gaze with calm determination. I'm aware of the risks, Envoy Kareth, but I didn't come all this way to back down now. Kareth studied him for a moment before nodding slightly. Then may your courage serve you well, Captain. You will need it. As Jason returned to his quarters, he couldn't help but feel the weight of what lay ahead. The trials would be the ultimate test, not just of his physical and mental abilities, but of his resolve and determination. He knew that failure was not an option. Too much was at stake. But as he prepared himself for the challenges to come, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that this was about more than just securing an alliance. There was something about Lady Miral, something that drew him in, despite her cold demeanor and cutting words. He sensed that beneath her disdain, there was a depth of emotion that she kept carefully hidden. And as much as he was determined to prove himself to the Zentaran High Council, he couldn't deny that he also wanted to prove himself to her. The trials would be the crucible in which his fate, and perhaps the fate of two worlds, would be decided, and Jason was ready to face whatever came next. The dawn of the next day broke with the crimson light of Zentari's twin suns, casting long, sharp shadows over the terrain of the Graviton Fields, a landscape chosen for the first of the Zentaran trials. These fields, known for their erratic gravitational anomalies, were a proving ground for agility and strength, turning the natural environment into a chaotic puzzle of floating rocks and unpredictable gravitational shifts. Captain Jason Hart arrived at the fields, dressed in a lightweight suit designed to enhance his mobility while offering minimal protection against the elements. He was not alone. Several of Zentari's finest warriors, all seasoned in these trials, stood ready to compete against him. Their lithe forms and confident expressions spoke of years mastering the treacherous terrain. Lady Morale was there to oversee the trials, her presence as commanding as the landscape itself. Her eyes, cold and impassive, followed Jason as he prepared, offering no hint of support or doubt. "Remember, Captain Hart," she said, her voice carrying clearly over the morning breeze, "this trial tests more than physical strength. Adaptability and intuition are key. Let's see if your human senses can keep up with zentari reflexes." At her signal, the trial commenced. The ground beneath their feet shifted ominously as gravitational forces fluctuated wildly. Jason sprinted forward, his eyes quickly adjusting to the movement patterns of the floating platforms. He leaped from one unstable rock to another, using the variable gravity to catapult himself forward in arcing, weightless bounds. Around him, the Zentaran competitors moved with a grace and precision that seemed almost otherworldly. They anticipated changes in gravity with an innate sense, their bodies flowing through the air with effortless control. Jason, however, relied on his training as a pilot, where reacting to sudden shifts and maintaining balance were daily routines. As the trial progressed, Jason's initial hesitance gave way to a fluid confidence. He began to read the environment's rhythm, predicting the gravitational pulls with increasing accuracy. A particularly challenging leap saw him navigating between two rapidly oscillating platforms, a move that drew murmurs of surprise from the onlooking Zentarans. Lady Morale watched with a frown that betrayed a grudging respect. As Jason completed the course, narrowly missing the record set by Zentaran champions, the crowd of spectators who had expected him to falter erupted into an appreciative murmur. Morale's expression remained cool, but her eyes flickered with a reevaluation of the human who continued to defy her expectations. Flushed with the unexpected success in the physical trial, Jason next faced the intellectual challenges set in the Hall of Echoes, a grand library filled with ancient Zentaran lore and puzzles that required both logic and creativity to solve. The trials here were different. They were quiet, contemplative. Jason was given ancient artifacts and cryptic texts, each a puzzle that intertwined Zentaran history with complex problems that tested reasoning and intellect. Around him, scholars and historians of Zentari whispered among themselves, curious to see how a human would interpret their most sacred and complex riddles. Lady Morale, ever the enigmatic overseer, observed as Jason approached the first challenge, a mechanical device that functioned as both a lock and a puzzle. The solution required understanding Zentaran engineering, a task that seemed daunting. However, Jason's background in spacecraft engineering and xenotechnology gave him a unique perspective. He carefully manipulated the components, aligning them in a way that even the Zentarans hadn't anticipated, unlocking the mechanism with a satisfying click that echoed through the hall. The next challenge was a strategic game akin to a three-dimensional chess, played with holographic pieces that moved according to both players' verbal commands and their intentions, gauged by the game's AI. Jason's opponent was a renowned Zentaran strategist, whose moves were sharp and calculated. The game was tense, with each player countering the other's strategies with precision. Jason, however, leveraged his experience in tactical simulations under pressure, eventually outmaneuvering his opponent in a surprising display of strategic depth. The scholars and council members, including Lady Morale, watched with growing interest as Jason methodically worked through each problem. His success in these intellectual trials began to stir a reluctant admiration among some council members, challenging their preconceived notions about human capability. As the final puzzle was solved, a cryptic linguistic riddle that unveiled a hidden message about Zentaran philosophy, Jason stood back, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. Lady Morale approached, her silver eyes reflecting the ambient light of the hall. "Your performance has been enlightening, Captain Hart," she conceded, her voice softening just slightly. "It seems there may be more to humans than I had previously judged." Her acknowledgement was not warmth, but it was a start, a crack in the icy facade she presented to the world. Jason met her gaze, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Thank you, Lady Morale. I hope that these trials are just the beginning of what we can learn from each other." The intellectual victories added a new layer of respect to the burgeoning relationship between Earth and Zentari, providing Jason not just a foothold, but a bridge towards genuine understanding, and perhaps in time, a true alliance. After demonstrating his physical prowess and intellectual acumen, The next trial for Captain Jason Hart was to navigate the intricate and high-stakes arena of Zentaran diplomacy. The setting was a formal banquet held in the opulent Crystal Hall, a gathering attended by Zentari's most influential leaders and foreign dignitaries. The shimmering walls and luminescent fixtures of the hall mirrored the complexities and subtleties required in the discussions that would ensue. Lady Morale, ever watchful, introduced Jason to the assembly, her introduction laced with a mix of skepticism and curiosity about his capabilities in the diplomatic arts. Tonight, we shall see if Captain Hart can match Zentaran wit and grace in conversation as well as he has in our trials, she announced, her tone challenging yet not entirely dismissive. As the evening progressed, Jason engaged with various council members, discussing trade, interstellar law, and cultural exchanges. His approach was one of humility and earnest curiosity, asking insightful questions and listening intently to the answers. His respectful demeanor and thoughtful engagement began to soften the initial resistance from some of the more skeptical attendees. A pivotal moment came when Jason addressed a sensitive topic, the Zentaran policy of isolationism. He tactfully acknowledged the strengths of their traditions and history, while also presenting a compelling argument for the benefits of selective engagement with other worlds. His speech, carefully balanced between respect for Zentaran sovereignty and advocacy for mutual progress, caught the assembly's interest. Lady Morale observed Jason's interactions with a critical eye, noting not only his diplomatic skills but also the reactions he elicited from her peers. To her surprise, several of her staunchest council allies expressed a cautious appreciation for Jason's perspectives, a development that both intrigued and concerned her. The success at the banquet earned Jason a moment of informal discussion with Lady Morale in the quieter confines of the palace gardens under Zentari's luminescent moons. The air was cool, carrying the fragrance of exotic blooms, creating an atmosphere more conducive to candid conversation than the formal settings they had previously encountered each other in. Lady Morale, Jason began, his tone sincere. I hope this evening shows not just my respect for Zentari, but also the potential for what our worlds can achieve together. Morale walked beside him, her steps graceful and measured. You have managed to impress some of my colleagues, Captain Hart, which is no small feat, but I must confess I am not yet convinced. Zentari has thrived in solitude for centuries. Why should we risk that for uncertain gains? Jason considered her words carefully before replying. Change is indeed fraught with uncertainty, but it also brings innovation, growth, and resilience. By integrating selective aspects of other cultures and technologies, Zentari could enhance its own greatness without compromising its core values. Morale paused, her gaze reflective as she looked out over a glowing pond. And what of you, Captain? Is your advocacy for this alliance purely professional, or is there more at stake for you personally? The question was direct, and Jason felt the weight of it. My mission is certainly driven by my duties as a captain, he acknowledged. But through the trials and my time here, I've grown to admire Zentari, its people, its culture. My advocacy is professional, yes, but it is also personal. I believe in the potential of our collaboration. Morale regarded him with a newfound intensity, as if reassessing him yet again. Let us suppose I consider this alliance, she mused. What would you see as the first step towards building this collaboration? Transparency and small collaborative projects, Jason suggested immediately. Perhaps starting with a joint scientific endeavor or cultural exchange that would yield immediate, visible benefits to both sides. Such initiatives could lay a foundation of trust and shared success. Morale nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. I will consider your words carefully, Captain Hart. You present a compelling case. As they continued their walk, the distance between them felt less pronounced than before. While hurdles remained, the night's dialogue had opened a door, however slight, towards mutual understanding and respect. A door that Jason was determined to hold open. After the formal discussions and trials, Lady Morale invited Captain Jason Hart to partake in a Zentaran cultural ceremony, a rare honor not typically extended to outsiders. The event, known as the Lumina Spectra, was a celebration of Zentaran artistry, combining their unique forms of music, dance, and light manipulation, deeply rooted in their spiritual beliefs about the cosmos. The ceremony took place under the open sky of Zentari's twilight, where the planet's rings were visible, casting ethereal shadows and colors across the landscape. The attendees were dressed in reflective garments that shimmered with the movements of their bodies and the fluctuations of the ambient light, making the gathering seem as if it were composed of stars themselves. Miral explained to Jason that the lumina spectra symbolized the flow of cosmic energy and the interconnectedness of all life forms, a concept that resonated deeply with Jason's own views on the universe. As they watched the performances, Miral leaned over to Jason and shared insights into the symbolism behind each movement and the historical origins of the melodies, revealing a side of her culture that was both ancient and profoundly sophisticated. During a particularly mesmerizing dance where performers seemed to float, guided by the subtle manipulations of gravity and light, Jason expressed his deep appreciation for the beauty and complexity of Zentaran culture. "I've never seen anything like this," he admitted. "The way your culture intertwines with art and science, it's extraordinary." Miral, who had been watching him closely, seemed pleased with his genuine enthusiasm. "Our traditions are the heartbeat of Zentari. Sharing this with you, I hope you see beyond our technological achievements to the soul of our people." This event marked a turning point for Miral, who began to see Jason not just as a diplomatic envoy, but as someone genuinely interested in understanding and valuing her world. This shift was not lost on Jason, who felt a growing connection and respect for Miral, seeing her not just as a leader but as a guardian of her culture's profound depths. Following the cultural ceremony, Miral invited Jason to join her at one of Zentari's ancient observatories, a place used for both astronomical research and contemplative reflection. The observatory, located on a high plateau, offered a panoramic view of the night sky, unobstructed by the lights of the city. As they stood side by side, watching the rotation of distant galaxies through the powerful telescopes, the conversation shifted from the formalities of diplomacy to more personal reflections. Miral shared stories of her childhood, spent studying the stars and dreaming of understanding the universe's mysteries. Jason listened intently, sharing his own experiences aboard starships, where the vastness of space both humbled and inspired him. It was here, under the vast canopy of the cosmos, that Miral spoke more openly about her fears for the future. "I fear losing our identity, our heritage," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yet meeting you, seeing your respect for our ways, it challenges my preconceptions." Jason turned to her, touched by her vulnerability. "I understand your fears," he said, "but I believe in building a future where we don't lose ourselves but grow together, learning from each other. Our differences could be our greatest strength." Miral looked at him, the starlight reflecting in her eyes, and for a moment, Jason saw her not as the formidable lady of the council, but as someone striving to do what was best for her people. "Perhaps you are right," she conceded, "but it will take more than just agreement between us. It will take courage to change hearts and minds on both sides." Jason reached out, his hand brushing hers lightly, a gesture of support that spoke louder than words. "We'll face that challenge together," he assured her, "as partners." Their eyes met, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them, a commitment to embark on this uncertain journey together, not just for the sake of their missions, but for the potential of creating something new and enduring between their worlds. As they left the observatory, the night felt a little warmer, the stars a bit closer, and their path forward a shared one, lit by the possibilities of mutual discovery and respect. The evening after their visit to the observatory, Captain Jason Hart and Lady Miral found themselves strolling through one of Zentari's lush bioluminescent gardens. The path was illuminated by the soft glow of plants that lit up in response to their footsteps, creating a trail of light that followed them as they walked. The atmosphere was serene, encouraging open conversation and reflection. Miral seemed thoughtful, her usual reserve softened by the natural beauty surrounding them. "Jason," she began, her voice carrying a new tone of camaraderie, "today at the observatory you spoke of partnership and courage. It resonated with me more than I anticipated." Jason looked at her, encouraged by her words. "I meant every word, Miral. I believe that together we can face the challenges ahead and pave the way for something truly beneficial for both our people." Miral paused by a glowing plant, its light casting a shimmering halo around her. "I have spent my life protecting Zentari's interests, often from what I saw as threats from the outside. But your persistence and respect for our ways have made me reconsider what it means to protect. Perhaps it also means opening up, albeit cautiously. Jason reached out, gently touching the glowing plant, mirroring her action. Opening up doesn't mean losing who you are. It's about enriching your society with the best parts of others. I see so much potential for us, Miral. Her gaze met his, a flicker of hope passing through her eyes. And I'm beginning to see it too. But if we are to convince both our worlds, we'll need a solid plan, something tangible they can see and understand. That's exactly what I was thinking, Jason replied, smiling. We could start with a joint venture, perhaps a cultural exchange or a collaborative research project, something that benefits both Zentari and Earth visibly and substantially. Miral nodded, her expression determined. Let's propose a pilot project. We could combine our technological insights with your human ingenuity, something small but scalable that can be a model for future cooperation. An excellent idea, Jason agreed. We could present it at the next council meeting, show them a blueprint for collaboration that includes safeguards for Zentari's culture and sovereignty. As they continued their walk, their conversation delved deeper into potential projects and strategies. By the time they returned to the palace, they had outlined a basic plan for a joint venture that would showcase the benefits of their alliance to skeptical parties on both sides. The proposal for a joint venture was ready to be presented, but as the day of the council meeting dawned, tension filled the air. Rumors of dissent among certain factions of the council had reached Jason and Miral, hinting at significant opposition to any form of alliance with Earth. Miral briefed Jason as they prepared to address the council. There are those who fear loss of identity, autonomy, and power. Our proposal needs to address these fears directly, showing clear benefits without compromising what makes Zentari unique. Jason nodded, adjusting his uniform. We'll make it clear that this is a partnership of equals. I'll emphasize Earth's admiration for Zentari's achievements and our desire to learn, not overpower. The council chamber was filled to capacity as they entered. The air was thick with anticipation, and the gazes of the council members were intense and calculating. Jason and Miral took their places at the podium, their presence together a strong statement of unity. Miral spoke first, her voice clear and commanding as she introduced the concept of the joint venture. She expertly outlined the benefits, using examples from Zentari's history where controlled openness had led to advancements and prosperity. Her speech was a powerful reminder of her leadership and her vision for Zentari's future. Jason then took the floor, his demeanor respectful yet confident. He spoke of Earth's diverse cultures and technologies, framing the Federation not as a monolith, but as a vibrant community of innovators and artists. He detailed the proposed joint venture, highlighting its potential to bring about new technological advancements and cultural enrichments while ensuring Zentari's traditions and autonomy were preserved. As they concluded their presentation, the chamber erupted into a mix of applause and murmurs. The debate that followed was intense, with several council members voicing their concerns and others expressing cautious support. The opposition was led by a faction wary of external influence, who argued passionately about the risks of diluting Zentari's purity and strength. However, as the debate progressed, it became clear that Miral and Jason's thorough presentation and the evident unity between them were swaying the majority. After hours of discussion, the vote was called. The results were closer than Jason had hoped, but in the end, the proposal passed. The council approved the pilot project by a slim margin, marking a historic moment of tentative trust and cooperation between Zentari and Earth. Miral and Jason exchanged a look of relief and triumph as the council chamber began to clear. We've taken the first step, Jason, Miral said, her voice filled with a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. Now we need to make it work. Jason nodded, his expression serious but optimistic. We will. We'll make it work, Miral. Together. As they left the chamber, their hands briefly touched. A small but significant gesture of their partnership, both personal and professional, ready to face the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. The approval of the pilot project marked a new dawn for Zentari and Earth relations, but it also stirred deeper currents of dissent among those who had opposed the alliance. Within days, murmurs of discontent grew into outright protests in some quarters of Zentari. Flyers denouncing the alliance were distributed, and influential figures within the council who had voted against the project found themselves increasingly vocal, calling for public forums and debates. Lady Morale and Captain Jason Hart found themselves navigating not just the logistical aspects of launching their joint venture, but also the delicate political aftermath of their victory. The pilot project, a collaborative research facility dedicated to combining Earth's innovative technologies with Zentari's advanced energy systems, was meant to be a beacon of their partnership. Instead, it became a focal point for opposition. Morale, understanding the need for decisive action, organized a series of public addresses across Zentari, attended by both supporters and detractors of the alliance. At each event, she stood firm in her commitment to the project, eloquently defending the benefits while acknowledging the concerns of her people. Jason, by her side, offered transparency about the project's goals and the measures in place to protect Zentari's interests and sovereignty. During one particularly tense forum in the capital city, a group of protesters confronted Jason directly, questioning his motives and challenging his respect for Zentari's culture. Jason's response, calm and steadfast, highlighted his genuine admiration for Zentari and his desire to see both worlds learn from each other. His open approach gradually won over some of the skeptics in the audience, turning hostility into thoughtful consideration. Morale watched Jason handle the situation with a mixture of pride and relief. His ability to connect with her people, even in the face of adversity, reinforced her belief in their partnership. After the forum, she expressed her gratitude privately. "Your strength and patience in these discussions make all the difference, Jason. I couldn't do this without you." Jason smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "We're in this together, Morale. Whatever it takes." Weeks turned into months, and the research facility began to yield its first successes, breakthroughs in energy efficiency and new sustainable technologies that could benefit both Zentari and Earth. These tangible results helped to sway public opinion, as the benefits of the alliance became undeniable. The facility held an open day, inviting Zentarans from all walks of life to see firsthand the fruits of the collaboration. Morale and Jason led the tour, showcasing the innovations and explaining how they were achieved through the blending of their respective worlds' expertise. The event was a turning point, softening even some of the staunchest opponents. With the project's success growing, Morale proposed expanding the collaboration to include cultural exchanges and joint education programs. The Council, seeing the benefits, voted overwhelmingly in favor this time, marking a definitive shift in Zentari's stance towards Earth. As peace and cooperation blossomed, so did the relationship between Morale and Jason. They found themselves not just allies, but partners in a deeper, more personal sense. Recognizing their mutual respect and affection had grown into love, Jason proposed to Morale under the stars of Zentari's night sky, at the very observatory where they had shared their hopes and fears. Morale accepted, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Yes, Jason. Yes to a future together, not just for us but for our worlds." Their engagement was celebrated not just on Zentari but across Earth as well, symbolizing not only their union but the successful integration of their peoples. The wedding, planned to coincide with the first anniversary of the research facility's inauguration, promised to be a grand affair, celebrating the union of two worlds.